Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with a second episode of my new React course that I'm publishing on YouTube. Last video, we just went over some of the basic stuff like why you would want to learn React and how the project or how the course will be structured. We left off by basically just setting up our first React application. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over 3 of the most fundamental topics that you need to learn and understand if you're going to learn React. I'm going to be going over what exactly JSX is. I'm going to talk about components, and I'm also going to go over props. So those 3 are the topics we're going to be talking in this video. I'm really excited to present this video for you guys. So with that in mind, let's get into the tutorial. Okay, everyone. So like I mentioned, in this episode, we're going to start actually working with React code. And in order to start talking about React code, I need to explain to you guys what exactly is JSX. So if like I mentioned in the previous episode, this over here might look kind of weird for people who are used to normal HTML or normal JavaScript, because what it looks like is a JavaScript function that returns a HTML div. Which is weird because this is not how you actually normally do when you're working with something other than React or any other framework that does something similar to this. And the reason for that is because this isn't JavaScript and this isn't HTML. This is something called JSX. This is a syntax presented by React, which makes it a lot easier for you to mix rendering logic with UI stuff, right? So we're just mixing our JavaScript and our HTML together to create this thing called JSX. Now, what exactly does this mean? Well, it means that every single time you're going to display some sort of UI in your screen or a group of UIs, you're going to create a function that will return some HTML. Now, I'm going to go more into that later on in this video when I'm talking about components. But for now, just know that probably all of your JSX will be rendered inside of some sort of function that is returned inside of a return statement of some sort of JavaScript function. So what exactly does this benefit us? Well, think about it this way. You've probably used some sort of template JavaScript language that allows you to put JavaScript inside of HTML. But with JSX, it's very simple. For example, we have over here our hello world being displayed, which as you can see, it just displays hello world in our screen. But if I want to, for example, create some sort of variable, let me call it name, and I set it equal to Pedro, which is my name, right? I can do this. This is inside of a function, so I can just declare variables. But if I want to display Pedro inside of my UI or inside of my div, what I can do is I can just delete this hello world, and I can just open and close curly braces. And what I'm saying here is that I'm going to be putting some JavaScript inside of this div or inside of this, and I'm saying with quotes HTML because this is not HTML. This is called JSX. So whenever I say JSX, just know that I'm talking about this whole kind of syntax over here, which includes the JavaScript and the HTML. So what exactly I can do here is I can just display the name, and what it will do is it will get this string and just put it inside of the div. So if I save this and I come over here, you'll see that my name is being displayed. So what I want to try out with this is I want to play a little bit more with this. So why is this cool? Well, because obviously if I wanted to have multiple instances of this variable, I could just do something like this. I can just declare name inside of for example, a header tag like this, and I can just copy and paste this 3 times, and I don't need to rewrite that in Pedro because the variable will represent it for me. And I can just come to my Chrome, and you can see that Pedro is being displayed in our screen. So you can get an idea of why this is cool, right? But that's not all you can do. Right here, name is just a string, right? And that's cool and all. We have to declare our h1 tag every time we want to declare a name. But what if we don't want to do this? What if we want to just, by default, say that the name variable is already a header tag? Well, you can do that because with JSX, like I mentioned, you can mix JavaScript with HTML. So any variable can actually be represented by some sort of HTML or JSX element. So instead of name being a string, it can actually be a header tag with the name Pedro, like this. I can say over here, Pedro, or I'll put it normally like this. And now instead of saying name 3 times inside of an h1 tag, I can just say name 3 times like this. And I'll just put it twice because you guys will get the point. But you'll see that it still is an h1 tag. It's not a normal, I don't know, p tag or a normal string inside of our a website. It's an actual header tag. So this is really cool. You can see how this can be really useful and will be really useful later on. But this is kind of the introduction I wanted to give to you guys of what exactly JSX is. It's just a mix between JavaScript and HTML, which allows you to put JavaScript variables and logic inside of your UI. Now, this is really cool, right? But imagine if you want to create some sort of, I don't know, imagine this is a website and we have a div over here, which is displaying something like information about a user, right? Or a person. Well, I could create variables like name, like this, and I could just say Pedro. I could also create some variable called age and just display it as a h2 tag just to make it different. And just say, for example, I'm 21, and I don't know, I'm gonna put one more thing, probably email, as an example, but we want to describe an email and say something like pedro@pedro.com, something like this, right? Well, I could put all of these variables inside of this div like we did before and say age like this and then email like this, and it will be displayed in our screen, right? We can see it over here. But what if we want to have multiple instances of this user in our screen? Well, we can just copy and paste this, obviously, a bunch of times, and that would be cool, as you can see over here. Now, the thing is, this is very ugly. You can see our code is becoming bigger and bigger every time we do this. You might argue that we can just create something like this, user, and set it equal to one of this, right? This whole thing, and then just display it a bunch of times inside of here, because this is something I mentioned to you guys, right? I said that you can just store UI inside of a variable, and you can just display user, and then how many times you want, right? And this will work, as you can see over here. It will work if I come to my browser. You can see it is displaying each user a bunch of times, which is great. But there's a better way to do this, right? If you look at here, we're storing all of this UI stuff, all of this JSX or HTML inside of a variable. You might also notice that it was automatically input here, a parentheses around this. And I'll go over more of that later, but just know that because this takes up more than one line in our code, because obviously we can put all of this into one line, but this is currently taking up more than one line. We have to surround it with parentheses. That's just something I wanted to mention. You see it over here as well. It's just part of how the syntax works. But you see, we're storing all of this UI into a single variable. But there's a way better way of doing this, which is more important, and you'll be using a lot of it throughout your code, right? Throughout your projects, which is using a component inside of your project. Now, what exactly is a component? Well, you're looking at a component right here inside of this code, because this function over here, the app function, is what is known as a component. Well, a component is just a JavaScript function that returns some sort of UI or some JSX. Or if you still are used to the word HTML, it's just a JavaScript function that returns, in quotes, HTML, because it's not HTML, it's JSX. So what does this mean? Well, it means that, for example, I'm going to come up with some examples over here. I'm going to create 2 functions. So I'm going to create a function called getName, like this, and this function will return a string called Pedro, and I'm going to create another function called getName component. I'm making it really obvious which one is the component and which one isn't, and this will return an h1 tag, which is JSX, and it will return the word Pedro. Now, this over here is a JavaScript function. This over here is a React component. What is the difference? Well, like I said, this returns some sort of primitive JavaScript type, or it doesn't even have to return anything. It can just be a function that doesn't return anything. But with components, you will always be returning UI stuff, such as h1 tag or divs or whatever you want. There's important stuff for you to know as well. Every component needs to start with a capital letter. So you can't create a component that starts with a lowercase letter, while in JavaScript, you can create a function that starts with a lowercase letter. But with components, you can't. So that's important for you to notice, because it's a mistake that a lot of beginners make when they're trying to create components and they don't understand why it's not working. Well, it might be because of this. Well, I just explained to you guys what a component is and how to create one, but I haven't really gone into too much detail about why you might want to use a component. Well, I'm letting you know right now, components are one of the most important things in React, and you will be using it throughout your whole project. The reason for this is because whenever you have some sort of piece of code that you might want to reuse it really easily, or you might want to organize it in some sort of way that will make your project not look messy, you would always do this using components. So for example, using the example that we had before, right? Where we have this user thing that includes a name, an age, and an email. Well, inside of this file, I can just create a user component like this, and remember, capital letter in order to be a component, and just put that this will return a div including all of this information, right? Now, name, age, and email, it doesn't have to be a variable like I was doing before. We can just delete this like this. I'm just going to delete all of this, and I'm just going to put all of this inside of this div. I'll just say that there's an h1 tag, which is going to be saying Pedro. Then there's I'm going to do for the other ones as well. One which is my age, and it will say 21. And then one which will be my email, which will say pedro@pedro.com, right? So we now have this function called user, or this component called user, which returns this div, right? So what I can do now is, if I want to display it inside of my app component, which, if you remember, the app component is the first component that is being displayed in the website. So when you go into the website, this UI over here is what is going to be displayed. So would it work if I just came over here and called user like this, like we were doing before? Let's check it out. It doesn't, because this is not how you actually work with components. They're not variables. You can't just call them like this. With components, in order to call them, what you have to do is you have to use this specific syntax where you write component names like this, and you self-close it as if it was some sort of HTML element, right? Now, you can make it like this as well, but not now. This is something we'll learn later on into the course. But for most of the components, you'll start in the beginning, and even later on, they are all self-closing like this. So this is how we're calling this component. And you can see that this works because over here, we're displaying the information. Now, if I want to reuse this, we can just do this many times and just paste it many times like this. And you'll see that it will be displaying all the times that we copy and paste it. Now, like I said, this is great because instead of just rewriting all this code again and again, we're just calling this function or this component 3 times, and all of the code inside of that displays the user is now hidden inside of this component. So it makes your code look better because if, for example, we put this in a different file, now this file doesn't have to have all of the logic for this. Now, as a beginner, you probably shouldn't be worrying that much about making your code look beautiful or about making your code look as optimized as possible. But don't worry, because we're going to ease into working with more complicated stuff and making your project look better as we're going through the course. But for now, this is amazing. Now, there's a concept I want to go over, which is extremely important. Because as you can see over here, we are reusing this user component 3 times. But there's a catch here. The thing is, it's displaying the same information for all of them, which is kind of annoying, right? Like, I don't want to see 3 divs saying the same name, age, and email. I want to kind of change them for each user that we try to display. So how exactly would we do this? Well, you know that in functions, in normal functions in JavaScript, you can just pass arguments, right? You can pass, for example, Pedro over here or something like that, right? But this is not how you do it in React with components. What you can do is you can have what is known as a prop. And a prop is just an object, so a JavaScript object that exists inside of the argument of some sort of component. So every React component will accept an argument to it, which is an object called props, like this. And this object will represent all the data that we might want to pass in to this component. So what kind of data can we pass in? Well, we can pass every kind of data we want. And how do we define it? Well, for example, if I want to pass a different name, a different age, and a different email for each kind of user, well, I can just say over here that for this user, for each user, I'll just pass a name like this, and I'll say that for the first one is Pedro. Then I'll pass an age, which I'll say that the age is, I'm going to say 21 again. And you'll see over here with strings, you can just pass it like this, but with numbers, you have to put curly braces. That's something I wanted to mention in order you get confused by it. And the last one is an email. So I can just pass an email like this and say pedro@pedro.com, right? So I'm passing these three pieces of information to this component as props. You'll know it looks kind of weird, but this is how you actually do it in React. So now we have three fields that are going to exist inside of the props object. So how will this props object look like? Well, it will look something like this. If you're familiar with JavaScript objects, this is one of the things that I assume you already know for this course, but it looks something like this. It's an object with a name that is something called Pedro. Then it has an age, which is 21. And then there is an email, which is the one that we wrote over there. So this is how the props object now is being represented inside of our component, which means that instead of manually displaying our names, our ages, and our emails, we can just say something like this, props.name, and say something like this, props.age. Or for this one, we can say props.email. And you'll see that since we only passed in information for the first user, you'll see that in our Chrome over here, it only displays the first user because the other ones don't actually have any information coming in from the props. But you can see it definitely worked, right? Which means that if we want to call three different users, we can just copy and paste this and just pass different props for each of them. I can create one that is called Jake, one that is called Jessica. Jake might be 29, Jessica might be 190. Jake might have an email also at pedro.co and Jessica as well. And you'll see that now it's really easy for you to rewrite code that looks different but has minimal changes to our actual code file. Components and props reduces the amount of code you have to write for more complex pieces of UI, for example, like this over here, where in normal HTML and JavaScript, we would have to maybe rewrite the div 3 times to display these 3 pieces of information. Here, we can just do something like this and just reuse the code 3 times like this and change them depending on the props that we pass. So I really want you guys to practice something like this. Before you get into the next video, I'm going to give you guys some sort of exercise that you can do on your own. And I really hope you guys understood what props, components, and JSX actually mean. If you have any questions, please leave a comment in the description. Especially with this course, I will be 100% focused on answering every single question because I really want everyone to enjoy as much as you can from this course. So please leave any comment in the comment section and I will be answering. So let's get into the exercise I want you guys to practice before going into the next episode. Okay, everyone. So the exercise I want you guys to practice is creating another component similar to the user one, but for something like job information. So I want you guys to create a component called job, and it will have 3 different props. It will have a salary prop, a position prop, and a company prop. Now I want you to display very similarly to what we did in the video. Just display them in the screen one by one, the salary, amount, the position, and the company. You can do it however you want. I would recommend not looking at the code that we wrote for user before starting doing this. Try to do it without looking at it and see if you can do it. I don't think I need to write the solution for you guys, but I'll just show it to you in like 10 seconds. So do it, check to see if it's working, and come back to see if you did it right. So, okay, everyone. Yeah, this is the solution. It's extremely similar to what we did before. It's just I just tweaked a little bit the values and the props, but this is how you would do something like that. And I would recommend playing around with this, trying to display different information, trying to do whatever you can to like make some sort of changes to it and see how it works and what happens. And yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe, because I'm going to be posting a lot of this course videos in the next upcoming weeks, and I would massively appreciate if you could help support the channel. Again, if you have any questions, leave a comment in the comment section, or go to my Discord and ask there. And yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.